We are getting into the wide receivers now. We're going to do our top 50. We're continuing to push towards our goal of 750 subscribers. So if you're new here, hit that subscribe button. So the first tier that we're going to talk about is the S tier, tier 1. And it's all the familiar faces that you're expecting, right? We've got Chase, Jefferson, and Lamb. They're in their own little mini tier. And then you've got Puka, Amon-Ra, Neighbors, Brian Thomas Jr., and Nico. So these are the 8 wide receivers that we always have been talking about that you want to try and get your wide receiver 1 from this group. And if you can secure a second one by going receiver, that is both of our favorite ways to start a draft.
Every mock draft we've done, we're definitely trying to hammer that point in. And I will say with Puka Nacua, he's getting closer and closer to moving down for me, still within this tier. But every day that Stafford misses practice, I'm getting a little bit more nervous. And I know what McVay said earlier last week when he was like, well, if it was week 1, he would be playing and he's going to be starting practice on Monday. But that kind of rang similarly eerie to what the 49ers were saying about Christian McCaffrey at the beginning of last season. Oh, if it was a playoff game, he'd be in there. And then lo and behold, we kind of know what happened. So I'm not trying to go apples to apples with that, but just keep a close eye on that. And if you are drafting this weekend, he might be worth kind of pushing down because all of these guys are elite.
Yeah, I share that sentiment. I still have Puka at 4. But I haven't gotten him a lot, mainly just because you've been drafting at the end of drafts now. They do have Jimmy Garoppolo there as the backup, not inspiring a ton of confidence, but that's maybe a little bit better than some other teams' situations. So, and I don't know if that affects Puka more than Adams or Adams more than Puka.
Adams and Jimmy don't even like each other. I'm sure that they've said that they've buried the hatchet, but I don't know. That sounds like maybe even more targets for Puka.
Well, maybe more reason to take Puka then. He's just going to be locked in on Puka. So, no, I've been taking a lot of Brian Thomas Jr. out of this group. I feel like he's the one that gets pushed down the lowest, and he's the one that people are maybe not as confident in, like worried about the volume or worried about last year's touchdowns or worried about the fact that it wasn't really consistent from him last year in terms of situation, right? He went from Trevor Lawrence to Mac Jones on a losing team. Like maybe they're a little better this year, and they have Travis Hunter now. So I don't know. There's a lot of question marks around Brian Thomas Jr. that I feel like are pushing him down in a way that I'm not doing. I mean, we talk about it all the time. He's a touchdown scorer. He's going to be their downfield threat. He got so much more involved closer to the line of scrimmage as the season went on. I think the sky's the limit for him going into his second year. And so I'm going to continue to be drafting him pretty aggressively.
BTJ is the perfect person to pair with Amon-Ra because Amon-Ra just has that year-over-year stability. BTJ, I don't want to call it boom bust because the way he finished the season was just awesome across the board, but maybe a little bit more upside. And that's a build that I've been doing a lot of in best ball. When I have like the 11 pick, I take Amon-Ra. Then, we see Achane and Henry go at 12, 13, and then BTJ kind of just falls into my lap. And
moving down to the second tier now, we've got Drake London, AJ Brown, and Ladd McConkey, another breakdown video that we did in another mini tier within this second tier. And then we got T. Higgins, Tyreek Hill, Jackson Smith and Jigba, and Garrett Wilson. So I really like this tier as well, especially up top. I really think getting a second before wide receiver 11 is a great strategy. So even if you miss on getting 2 in that top tier, getting one of London, AJ Brown, or Ladd McConkey as your number 2 wide receiver also, I think, sets you up for a lot of success. Now, we did do that breakdown video, and I have moved McConkey behind AJ Brown since that video. So, we're in lockstep now in that tier of 9, 10, and 11 from London, Brown, and Ladd. And, not that I'm super worried about it, but their offensive line is just getting decimated. And they signed Keenan Allen, who, should get at least a decent number of targets. So it just made me feel like I could more comfortably make that switch between AJ Brown and Ladd. You have T. Higgins ranked at 12, a little bit higher than me. I do have him at 13 though. So that brought the consensus there. I have Tyreek 1 spot ahead of Higgins. And then JSN and Garrett Wilson feel like kind of the last players that have some level of upside where I feel confident in them as my 2. But even then, I'm just like, I'm feeling like I'm behind the 8 ball at receiver if I'm taking them as my 2. And if I miss on them, my 2, like my quarterback and my running backs better be really good, or I'm going to be starting to get worried about how my team's turning out.
I've kind of moved Ladd into his own little mini tier at 11. I'm not quite as confident as you are kind of keeping him with London and AJ Brown, but definitely not confident enough to move him down to 12 just because that 12 position has been so in flux. And I actually have recently moved Tyreek Hill up from like 19 to 14, I want to say, just
Yep.
because as scared of him as I am this season, it's his upside is just so tantalizing because I think you said it on one of the mocks we did where it's like there's all this noise and it can be week 1 and he goes for 110 and a touchdown on 8 receptions and we're all like, "Oh, why did we push him down?" I mean, he
Yep.
doesn't seem to have lost a step at least speed wise, and I think that's kind of his biggest concern is once that happens, and of course one day it will happen. That's his biggest calling card. So I'm getting a little bit more in on him, but I'm still kind of proceeding with caution. I still have JSN ahead of him, and JSN's probably been my most consistent guy all off season at number 13, just because, to me, obviously so much is changing within that offense, but we saw what the Saints looked like those first 2 weeks under the same coaching regime, right? Like they came out absolutely firing, and Derek Carr looked like he was going to be an MVP candidate. If Sam Darnold can catch some of that magic and JSN just continues to develop and improve, he's not going to have a lot of competition because I know Cooper Kupp in the beginning is probably going to draw a ton of targets, but at this point of his career, like, can we really count on Cooper Kupp to finish a full healthy season? So, I think he's going to be in a great spot, and assuming the rug doesn't fall out from under Darnold, he's someone I'm getting a little bit more excited about.
Yeah, and that's like a zig as the industry zags, I feel like, because so many people are getting worried about JSN. I feel like he's becoming a popular, like, do not draft or a popular bust pick from this group. But I share that sentiment too. I really still think that the floor is high. He's going to get a lot of volume. I know people are worried that he's not going to get as much slot usage because of Cup, but like, I still think the targets are going to be there. I still think Darnold is an improvement over Geno Smith, regardless of what some people may say about that. So, I do expect JSN to have another good season this year. And I love him in Dynasty too. So it's just like, I feel like the player himself is also just really good. And I like to have really good players on my team as generic as it sounds. Sometimes the role's in flux and it's like, oh, I don't know about opportunity and all that stuff. And at some point it's just like, let's pick the good players. And Hugh finished as wide receiver 9 last year. If he gets similar volume, I would expect that he can finish somewhere in that similar range. All right, moving down to tier 3, the B tier now. And this is an interesting tier. I feel like there's a lot of names here and there's a lot of players that maybe don't go here in other people's rankings too. So this is kicked off by Devontae Adams. Then we got Mike Evans, who's been looking great in camp. And with Godwin potentially missing time, he could get off to a super hot start. Obviously, Ibuka is there, but, I think Evans is somebody that you might want to start circling from this range. Terry McLaurin, he needs to sign or he's going to fall significantly if he's not signed in the next week or so. So keep an eye on him and his situation. Marvin Harrison Jr., we're both a little bit back in on him. I'm cautiously optimistic on him. I did move him back into my top 20. So I do like Marvin Harrison before the rest of this tier. Now, DK Metcalf should be a target hog in that Steelers offense. Rashee Rice, obviously impending suspension, but once he's back, he could easily be a top 10 receiver rest of the season. Cortland Sutton, he was great down the stretch once him and Knicks kind of hit their stride after week 8. I really like him. I really think he's getting buried in rankings on sites, and I do think that he's absolutely worth being part of this tier and somebody that I'm targeting heavily. And then the last guy on this tier is Tedero McMillan. So I do think that there's something to be said about rookie volume, 8th overall pick, and that with how Bryce Young looked to close last year, I'm hoping that these two build chemistry throughout camp and hit the ground running once the season starts.
I would say for this tier specifically, just from like a draft strategy perspective, start figuring out the players that you like and then looking on the specific platform that you will be drafting on. Because on Sleeper, for example, like I can be a little bit above consensus on Marvin Harrison, but Sleeper has him as the wide receiver 12. So I don't really foresee getting him. And then on the contrary, for my ESPN draft, like I am circling and starring Tedero McMillan because I am way above ADP on that. So just always kind of be aware going into the draft where these guys are, because this is kind of a big group. And with Sutton too, I remember when we did our first pass at rankings a couple months ago, I was kind of digging deep into him and like kind of trying to make excuses as to why to push him down. But I think when you look at these teams where there's a very clear cut number one and the number two is so in flux and the number three is so in flux, and he already has that safety blanket chemistry with Bo Nix, I think just the touchdowns that he's going to score, he's going to be in for a really good season.
Yeah, I agree there. And you actually did a piece on that last year where you were looking at like number ones and then how far down the ADPs are for the number twos, and like talking about secure volume and how you can push those guys up in your rankings because they tend to outperform their draft position. I think you looked at CeeDee Lamb and Jalen Tolbert last year, as justification for moving him up to one in like that secure role. So I couldn't agree more on Sutton. I just think that they're going to be simpatico to start the year, and he's the alpha to start, right? If somebody emerges, Pat Bryant or Devon Vele or Marvin Mims,
they're those guys outside now too. Like,
yeah, I mean they could develop into more, right? But I just think Sutton's role is so secure, and he's going to be featured, and then whoever else steps up is just going to help the offense overall. Tedro McMillan, it's a great point on ESPN. We have him ranked as wide receiver 23 at this point in the offseason. ESPN, I think, has him at 32 or 33. So make sure that you have him circled and start as well, because you can get him at a great value there. All right, moving down to tier 4 and the C tier, we've got a lot more players here as well. A bunch of guys that I'm actually pretty excited about to draft as potential starters. So that's kind of how I did this tier. We're going to go down to 31, but I do like these guys as potential third starters, especially if your team started with a couple running backs and a quarterback, or maybe you went in on tight end, and so you're a little bit behind the 8 ball at receiver. Getting one or two of these guys to try and fill in the rest of your receiver group as starters, I think is a great way to try and attack this part of the position. So first guy here is Xavier Worthy. Obviously huge upside, and Rashee Rice is probably going to be out to start the year, so he could kind of reassume his role as the number one that he had at the end of last year, and we saw the upside that can present. Devontae Smith, he's just pretty much as stable and solid as he gets. Obviously, in a different situation, he would be ranked much higher than this. He's a great player. I think you can't go wrong drafting him. Chris Olave, this is going to be way higher than you'll see him pretty much anywhere, because Matt's irrational love for Olave pushes him up in our consensus rankings. But he should be the one, and depending on who starts, hopefully they can be adequate enough to get him the ball. Travis Hunter, he's got all kinds of upside. We haven't seen a wide receiver, and I know he's got the defensive part of it too, but we haven't seen a wide receiver go second overall in a really long time. There's just a crazy amount of talent here. He's going to be close to mid-range too. So in any PPR leagues, I'd push him up even higher than this. These are half PPR rankings, but I think he could be in a spot to hit the ground running, because he's going to be the number 2 wide receiver to start. Jameson Williams, another guy like Xavier Worthy, who's just got tons of upside because of the big play potential. And if they do expand his role in the offense, he's going to be much better than this ranking currently. I'm definitely paranoid to have him ranked as low as I do, because I just think it's another one of those things where, like with Tyreek Hill, where we look up in week 3 and it's like, oh my gosh, he's gotten 7 or 8 targets all 3 weeks. He's got 2 100-yard games. Like, that kind of happened with Rashee Rice, right? A little bit different because it's low ADOT, but high volume. And like, I don't know. I just have this weird feeling that we're going to be looking at JMO as somebody that, could be taking that vault into the top 10 or 15, area at wide receiver. DJ Moore, I'm hesitating on DJ Moore because I want Rome Odunze to be a thing so badly. Like, I want to rank Rome Odunze ahead of DJ Moore. So that's why I have him kind of buried in the rankings here. You'll see him a lot higher than this in most spots. Jacoby Myers, this is the Jacoby Myers channel, so we love him. We're going to be pushing him up pretty much all over, just because he can definitely be a back-end starter and be very productive for your teams. And then Calvin Ridley, we've made the Terry McLaurin comp a lot, but he seems to look really good with Cam Ward, and they're building their chemistry. And his role last year was still really good, right? He had the most unrealized air yards in the league of everybody. And so if Cam Ward keeps some of those downfield passes on target a little bit more, I think we could see a big year from Ridley like we haven't seen from him in a few years.
Yeah, I'm getting really, really excited about that connection. And I will touch on with Xavier Worthy, if he does make his way onto your teams, one thing that you can always kind of keep in the back of your mind, assuming he gets off to a hot start when Rashee Rice is gone, is just flipping him once Rice comes back. And I know that might be very difficult because if he's getting that short area stuff, you're going to say, no, 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 Rice is not really going to be a thing. And if they do switch back, you're going to wish you had sold high. So, don't go into your draft thinking about trades necessarily, but always just kind of keep that in the back of your mind because I'm sure you'll see him on some sell high videos. And then with Chris Olave specifically, I'm getting a little bit more nervous of the fact that, Tyler Shuck hasn't really emerged looking good and kind of no one has looked good. But I will say, his first couple seasons, he was still top 25. We're not ranking him, through the moon. We're kind of at that 25-ish range in the hope as well as that Kellen Moore kind of turns around this offense too. And then, yeah, I think Travis Hunter, I saw a funny tweet this morning where it's like, you can tell if somebody's like a gambler or a cryptocurrency guy if they take Travis Hunter because they just kind of love that risk reward upside. So I'm very excited to see how he's utilized in this offense. And it was great to see Liam Cohen say, I think it was last week, like, yeah, we want him on 80% of the snaps on offense, which I don't know if we're going to see it that high necessarily, but you just love to see that. And you bring in an offensive-minded head coach, and they trade their first pick from next season to move up a couple spots to get this guy, that they're all in.
If he does play 80% of the snaps, it's one of those things too where he's ranked too low because if he's going to be out there that much on offense, and they're gonna pedal in the defense gradually to see how much he can handle in game, like he's gonna be getting so many targets like this. I anticipate this offense being so concentrated in those two guys, in Brian Thomas Jr. and in Travis Hunter. It's going to be reminiscent of Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle in the past, maybe not last year, but how concentrated it was for a couple of years. All right, so going down to the D tier now, we got tier 5. And the first guy up there is Emeka Egbuka. So this is going to be as high as you see him anywhere. We both have him right outside our top 30. And you see he shows up one spot ahead of Godwin. Godwin doesn't look like he's going to be able to start the year healthy now. So if he starts on the pup, isn't quite ready to go, I think that opens the door for Egbuka to really take off early in the year. And if that's the case, it's going to be really hard to put that genie back in the bottle, in my opinion. I think Egbuka might just start the year as a starting wide receiver for your 3 wide receiver teams. So, and without Godwin, I just anticipate that that's going to be the case. So I don't know. I'm really struggling with not putting him even higher. I just think that the sky's the limit for him. He was the 19th overall pick, all glowing reports at a camp. Baker loves him. The whole team seems to love him. So I don't know. I'm just super excited on Egbuka right now. And then Godwin, obviously, if he's going to be out there, the flip side to that coin, right? If he is ready to go, then, I would move him up. But I'm just a little bit worried about, as big of an injury as it is, him returning to form immediately. We saw it with Pacheco and we saw it with Pollard when they had similar injuries, that it just is really hard to get back to the same level of explosion right away. Even once everything is fully healthy, it takes just a long time to get that explosive playmaking back. Next guy up is Rome Odunze. So I mentioned him with DJ Moore. I really like Rome. I really feel like he could be the number 1. And if he does assume that role, that this is going to be way too low. So I'm definitely looking to take a shot on Rome Odunze in this tier. Zay Flowers, neither of us like him that much. He's kind of just a do not draft guy for me. He's not going to go this low, so I'm never going to get him. George Pickens, another guy that I've seen ranked really high, like up at 25. But I just am so unsure there that he can be consistent. So I understand that you look up at the end of the year and maybe he's wide receiver 26, but it comes with a lot of boom bust. So maybe a good flex play, but not somebody I'm probably going to get a lot of.
Jerry Jeudy up next. My biggest issue with Jeudy was last year was the splits with and without Jameis Winston. Now I know that Flacco can probably support him, so maybe this is a little bit too low, but that just definitely scares me a bit. And I think a lot of us are kind of acting like Jeudy has just always been this like top 10 guy, where he's been a waiver wire guy most of his career. And then moving on to Ricky Pearsall, he's someone I'm getting more and more excited about for sure. I just think that this offense is going to be fantastic. He was a first round pick, for a reason. Maybe he was reached on a little bit, but he showed out at the end of last season in a way that I think a lot of us are really excited about. And And then with Matthew Golden, I keep pushing him up and up and up. We see Jaden Reed is in a walking boot, and I know everyone wanted to think that Jaden Reed was going to be playing in 2 wide receiver sets, but they've never given us reason to believe that otherwise. So we kind of know what Dobbs is on the outside. He's going to score some touchdowns, but he's not necessarily a world beater. So I think, with Golden's ability to get open, and let's not forget the fact that he ran a 4.29. Like, I know he doesn't necessarily play that fast, but it's definitely in there. So with Jordan Love, probably going to have to air it out more this season. He's someone who's a hyper target of mine. And then Cooper Kupp, this is probably driven by your ranking a little bit. No doubt whatsoever that he can come out blazing in the beginning of the season, similar to what we saw last year. But I'm just a little bit worried that age is kind of catching up to him. And then with Jalen Waddle, you're going to see him getting drafted all over the place. I'm sure you're going to see him get pushed up in some leagues quite a bit, because we always want to make him a little bit more of a thing than he really has been the last 2 seasons, but no doubt in the talent as well. And I did kind of want to just touch on what you mentioned with Emeka Egbuka. If we get word that Godwin is starting the season on PUP, he is someone that I am starting with confidence week 1, week 2. I mean, we saw Godwin before he got hurt be the wide receiver 2 in fantasy. And if Egbuka is just going to step into that high volume role, maybe not quite as high volume, but I just don't see why not. I mean, it's Baker Mayfield. He's just going to see this guy open and just chuck it to him 12 times a game. This isn't like an Aaron Rodgers earn your stripes kid type situation. Baker's just like, hey, he's a baller, and I'm going to feed my guy. So
yeah, I think Baker described it as yak out the wazoo, right? Just like he can go up and make the contested catch, and he just says he stays grounded when he's supposed to. And yeah, so Baker obviously loves him, and I totally agree with that analysis. Baker is just going to be slinging it, and he's already got good chemistry with Egbuka. All right, so going down to the 6th tier here, the F tier, and a lot of players here. We're going down to 51. So we got Juwan Jennings. This is pretty notable because he's way lower than expected, but with that calf injury, unfortunately, we're just going to be a little bit more risk averse there in terms of injury. Stephon Diggs, he's looking great, but I still have a little bit of reservation coming off that ACL. Brandon Ayuk, he's not going to be ready until week 6. So, draft kind of at your own risk tolerance there. When he comes back, he could be good, but when he comes back, he could also not be so good. So I don't really know what to do with Ayuk. So that's why we have him buried down here. Jordan Addison, 3-game suspension, but he should be fine after that. So if you can get him this late, I think he's a great value. You mentioned when you were talking about Golden, Jaden Reed in a walking boot. So he got pushed down since our last ranking set, but I still think once he's healthy that he can be pretty good, especially if the Packers do go more towards a downfield passing attack or a little bit more passing than they had last year. And I think having Golden is going to help him, because he, works in the slot, not a high volume guy by any means, but he can really win down the field. And I think if somebody else is drawing a bunch of attention, that he can kind of thrive.
Deebo Samuel, one of the things that's getting me a little bit more excited about him is the fact that, Terry McLaurin hasn't been practicing. So he's getting a few more throws, and obviously they're playing different roles, but it'll be interesting because Zach Ertz was the number 2 target on that team. So hopefully he steps in and can stay healthy and is looking good. And then with Darnell Mooney, monitor the injury. He's definitely a late round target of mine. And the fact that Michael Penix loves to sling it deep, he can definitely win in those areas. And then with Pittman, and I guess I'll put Pittman and Downs together. Pittman, he's shown over the course of his career his ability to draw a ton of targets. Never really been a touchdown guy. So maybe in a deeper PPR league, he can have some value if Richardson can figure out how to complete some passes. But love both those players. It's just such a crowded offense that wants to be run heavy that it makes me a little bit worried. And then with Trey Harris, I'm definitely less excited now with the addition of Keenan Allen. We've got some reports that he's also dropping the ball in camp, literally. And I've never been a huge Trey Harris guy anyway, so I'm probably going to keep pushing him down.
Yeah, and to hear that, Quentin Johnston's drop issues are a non-factor because Trey Harris has been dropping the ball so much was alarming to me when I heard that. I was like, oh, I don't know if I believe that or not, but that's wild to hear. So,
yeah.
And with the Colts guys too, I do like both of the players individually, but like you said, the offense is so crowded, and all of the camp hype has been around A.D. Mitchell, who was expected to open the year as the number 4, but now it's like, oh, is he going to move up? And he got to play in the first preseason game because they sat their other 3 wide receivers, and he looked pretty solid in that game too. So got 6 targets, although he only caught 2 of them, but still had almost 40 yards. So I don't know. The Colts situation is really tough to try and tackle. So, that's why they're kind of buried down here, despite how good the players actually are. Somebody I did want to note too, a notable exclusion from this list is Khalil Shakir. We're both much more worried about the injury than we're comfortable ranking, right? So he just missed, and Keon Coleman also just missed. So Buffalo receivers, unfortunately, don't quite make the list, although I do anticipate that both of them will be drafted in pretty much every league. All right. And with that, that is our wide receiver rankings going into draft season. Good luck in your drafts, and we look forward to talking to you next one.